Excuse me. So, yeah, after further analysis, I think I was a little bit. I wasn't aiming directly at the. I was going a little overboard beyond the scope or the aggression of the language with regards to the thesis. So he's just maligning the critic more harshly, but he's not. It's not like virulent. He's not like he doesn't hate the critic. He just maligns the critic overall a little bit. So let's just say we'll call it biased because it is biased. He's he where um he um he assays them, he assails them. I think it's sales. I think we already used the sales though. I'm not sure. Did we? Oh, here it is. Assailing. Um, where um we often times disregards critics. Okay, so let's see. I think this is more in line with supporting our thesis. The lettermost phrase of there's a large swath of the literary critic population is already judgmental by nature. So once they a large swath will be discouraged by at least in comparison to his more measured reproach of bad content creators. So here we're backing off on our language. We're saying it's biased. He oftentimes disregards bad critics, at least in comparison to his more measured reproach of bad content creators. Um, e.g., I don't know if that's a good place to put that. Um, use an e.g. Write a list bad authors. I'd rather have it say authors, writers, or poets. Rather have it not say bad, because then is it bad authors? Just a little bit confusing. Yeah, I don't like it. So we won't put it in there. Just say bad writers or authors. And he calls critics critics. He seems to call authors their wit. He seems to call them like wits. But wit can also mean like the wit of an author. So it can be the positive traits ascribed to an author. Um, so I don't want to open that Pandora's box. Unless we have to, unless it adds to the essay, unless we can, unless we've got enough room and time and it fits in with our thesis. I mean, those are the considerations. Okay, so we have to describe bad critics, least comparisons, more measurable approach to bad authors. Yes, that's what the thesis says. To malign bad critics. Yeah, okay, we just fixed it. We just fixed it. I knew it was wrong. More harshly than he does bad writers. So it's much more balanced. Much more balanced. We don't have to argue the world. We're not arguing like he maligns all critics. He just says, bad critics are bad. And bad writers are bad, but bad critics are worse. And then he gives a recipe for being a great critic. This long recipe. And then if we want to argue, then if our argument goes beyond the thesis, says not only does he malign bad critics, like maybe our last point, is he maligns all critics. And he says it at the end of this, and he says it at the end of that. It seems like, so then we're not only we're only defending the thesis, but we actually make a stronger point because this thesis isn't trying to argue the world. It's kind of like if your thesis is like you have to level 10 argue it, then every single quote and argument needs to be at level 10 in terms of the strength to get to that level 10 thesis. But if your level 10 thesis is only level 5, and most of your points are at least level 5, if not level 7, or then when you have a level 7 argument that goes beyond the thesis, especially if it's well placed, it can perform wonders in terms of the reader's eye. The reader can be like, oh, good point. You're only arguing this, but your point went beyond that at a very strategic point in the essay. So probably towards the end, right? Like maybe the very last point is like, and it would be obviously the best if the book ends, which we outlined, the beginning of the essay and the end of the essay, the beginning of part 1 and the end of part 2. If both of those points he just talks about critics in general and he's just talking smack, that's a great way to end it because it ends on a really strong high, where the argument is even stronger than is required to defend the thesis. And then we go into our conclusion in a high with the educator saying, they've got this figured out, the writer's got this figured out, and as long as we don't mess up the conclusion and, our writing is good throughout, then, we'll be able to earn a strong mark. So, all right, so a perfect judge. So let's perfect judge. We skip this one. Skip this one. We even skip this one. We skipped a lot. These are great lines too. There's some really good stuff in here. Being very picky. A little learning. There it is. A perfect judge. So this is part 2. And if we do need more quotes, we have more. So now we can talk about part 2. Survey the whole. Or seek. So he says, don't seek slight faults to find. But later, he kind of comments on that as well about perfection. So we don't need to repeat a lot, sort of that point with similar lines. So you want to be very picky in terms of what you're going to mention, what you're going to defend. But I like that. I like these first two lines. And then I really like here. Again, he repeats himself, but not in a bad way, in a pretty amazing way. But not enough for us to quote, multiple. Like here, this is great. This is great. These 4 lines, I think, are fantastic lines that we should keep. And we already know that. Okay, so those are 2 separate quotes. And then we'll go here. Yeah. And then here, these 4 lines are very similar. It's just saying that they're similar. This is those most recent 4 up here are about perfection. Something exact and some peculiar parts. And then here it's about appreciating balance in writing, like just good, measured, confident, sort of right down the middle writing. The whole at once is bold and regular. But what are we arguing here? Does that argue our thesis? No, it's a strong argument. It's a beautiful 4 lines, phenomenal. No single part's an equally surprised. However, it's a bit of a stretch. We're stretching our argument now. We're not really arguing the thesis directly. That's really talking about a writer being a good writer, and our thesis is about he's sharing specific guidelines for how one might become a great literary critic. So although he shares specific guidelines for how one may become a great literary critic, Pope just deploys rhyme and word choice in order to malign bad critics, much more harshly than he does bad writers in part 1 and 2 of his essay on criticism. This doesn't really do that. This is more talking about there's nothing too crazy. Like in good writing, there's nothing too crazy. No monstrous height or breadth or length appear. The whole at once is bold and regular. Which, I don't know. That's a tough thing to argue. That's a totally different essay, totally different thesis. He's arguing like, yeah, directors that make, hour and a half, 2-hour movies, and there's a, rising action and a climax and everything's in order, unlike some movies where things are out of order, like Memento or Pulp Fiction or, some of these other, or these, 4-hour extravagant 3.5-hour movies. He's basically, that's kind of what he's saying. That's not exactly what he's saying. I mean, I don't know. I don't know for certain, but that's what I'm taking from it without any like lectures from educators and without having read this in many a year. But that's what the focus of this is on. Just if I can come to this cold and try to pick this apart and explicate, then hopefully you'd be able to bring even more to your ideas in your essays, because you're going to be in class, you're going to be lectured to, you're going to have students around you that are reading the same stuff, the same material. You can ask them questions, you can talk to them, you can talk to your teacher, you can, this is the fun of learning. It's, you learn in a silo, right? I did a lot of work alone, most of my work alone, but then you can also get out there and communicate and connect, with others and share ideas. And so Yeah. So yeah, let's so yeah, let's knock that paragraph out. Maybe the next one as well in the next video. Thank you.